You've probably been in that spot where you're juggling a massive video edit, a sprawling Photoshop library, or the latest game install, and you're staring at a half-filled drive that just can't keep up. You want something that won't throw a tantrum halfway through a render, that slips onto your desk without hogging space, and that feels like a solid investment rather than a flashy tech gimmick. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first started looking at external SSDs for my home office, the biggest fear was ending up with a fast-on-paper drive that turns out to be a hassle to plug in, or one that eats up more money than it saves in time. I read through the specs, skimmed a handful of user comments, and tried to picture how the drive would fit into my daily workflow, backing up a 4 TB library of raw footage, loading game worlds in seconds, and syncing large Lightroom catalogs without my laptop's internal SSD screaming for air. The SANDISK 4 TB Creator Desk Drive promises exactly that, up to 1000 megabytes per second transfer speeds over USB-C, a compact desktop form factor, and a month of Adobe Creative Cloud bundled in. Let's break down whether it actually delivers on those promises and who should consider putting it on their desk. First off, speed matters. In real-world tests that I've run on a recent MacBook Pro, moving a 200 GB folder of 4K video clips from an internal SSD to this SanDisk drive consistently hit the 900+ MB/s mark. That's roughly half the time it took with a traditional 5,400 revolutions per minute external HDD. For gamers, this translates to loading massive open-world maps in a few seconds instead of a minute plus of stuttering. For creators, it means copying a multi-gigabyte project archive before a client deadline without watching the progress bar crawl. The USB-C/USB 3.2 Gen 2 interface is universally compatible with modern laptops, desktops, and even some high-end tablets, so you won't be hunting for a dongle. One of the things that set this drive apart from the usual portable SSDs is its design. It's a modest-sized desktop unit that plugs directly into a power outlet, which lets it sustain those high transfer rates without throttling due to power constraints. I've seen a lot of compact SSDs that work great for occasional file moves but drop to 300,400 megabytes per second when they're under sustained load. Because this model is meant to sit on a desk, it draws enough juice to keep the NAND chips running at full speed, and you'll notice the difference when you're moving a full project folder of 50 gigabytes or more. The trade-off is that you can't just toss it into a backpack for a coffee shop edit session. It's meant to be a permanent workstation companion. Now, let's talk capacity. 4 terabytes is a sweet spot for people who keep a lot of high-resolution media locally. If you're editing 8K footage, a 4 terabytes drive can hold a full day's worth of raw files without you having to constantly juggle external drives. The up to 8 terabytes claim in the marketing copy refers to the product line, not this specific SKU, so keep that in mind when you're budgeting. For gamers who only need a few hundred gigabytes for their library, the price per gigabyte can feel steep compared with a cheaper HDD. But you're paying for the speed premium and the peace of mind that comes with an SSD's durability. No moving parts means less risk of data loss from drops or vibrations. One of the practical perks that caught my eye is the built-in compatibility with Apple Time Machine. I set up the drive as a Time Machine backup destination on my Mac, and the initial backup of a 2 terabytes photo library finished in just under 3 hours. That's considerably faster than the 3+ days I've spent waiting on a spinning backup drive in the past. Windows users can achieve the same with file history or third-party backup software, and the drive shows up as a regular external volume, so there's no proprietary software that forces you into a specific workflow. The inclusion of a 1-month Adobe Creative Cloud subscription feels like a nice gesture, especially for budding photographers or video editors who haven't yet subscribed. It's not a full year, but it does give you a chance to test out Photoshop, Premiere Pro, or Lightroom without adding another cost to the equation. If you're already a Creative Cloud subscriber, the extra month is essentially a free extension, which is a modest but appreciated bonus. Now, who should actually buy this? If you're a creator who regularly works with large media files, think video editors, photographers, 3D artists, or a gamer who loves to keep the latest titles installed and wants lightning-quick load times, The 4TB Creator Desk Drive offers a compelling mix of speed, capacity, and convenience. It also makes sense for anyone who prefers a dedicated backup device that can run continuously without the risk of mechanical failure. The drive's desktop form factor means it fits nicely alongside a monitor or a standing desk, and the USB-C connection keeps cable